Bob Williams, a director of the Lichfield and Hatherton Canals Restoration Trust, and have been since 1996. So I do know a bit about it, but not everything by any means. And we're here by invitation to meet Eric Wood, our president, and indeed the founder of the trust. Oh, there you are, Eric. Come along and join us in conversation.
Oh, well, indeed. I'm just doing a few plants here to sell for the trust.
Oh, yes, of course, like you always have.
I've been selling plants for the trust for many years to raise money.
Excellent. You've just decided to go.
I bought it 40 years out from Dennis Cooper, but I've just had a new bottom put on it because it was worn out. It's a bit like my heart, which is worn out.
Now, come this afternoon to meet Eric Wood, who's been the president for many years and the founder of our trust. So, come with me, let's meet Eric to just talk through his recollections of how the Canal Trust came into being all those years ago. Eric, thanks for the invitation to come to see you. We'd like to look into the past because you've lived it better than anyone, and I'm sure your recollections are as clear as they ever were. Now, the Lichfield Canal Ogley Lock section and the Hatherton Branch Canal were both closed by the British Transport Act in 1954-55, restricting any passage of boats along the canals, rendering them abandoned. So that was the mid-1950s. So 30 years later, you took it upon yourself to set about restoring them. How did that come about?
Well, I happened to be talking to Harry Arnold and a chap called Davis at Stenson Marina, and I said I was looking for a property by the side of the canal. So they said they knew one, and Rob Davis recommended this property that we're in now. He said it's a very small one up and one down, 2 bedrooms. He said, but it has a lovely garden, and he said it's got a very long mooring. So I came along the canal to look at it, and when I came along the canal past Fradley Junction, I saw this arm going up past the Lichfield Cruising Club, and I saw a big sign that said Lichfield Cruising Club only, no passage. So I thought, where the dickens does that go to? And I thought in my own mind, I'll have a look when I get back home and have a look where it's going to. When I got home, I looked it up and I found that it was a good route, quick route up into Birmingham. And later on I spoke to people like Ike Argent, who was a boater on the canal years ago. He was you probably know, he's a Thomas Caton tarboat man,
so,
Ike
yes.
Argent. And he said, you'll never get that open. I said, why not? He said, well, it never had any bloody water. I said, why, what's the problem? He said, well, it's sand and gravel, you know. He said, you'll never get water in it. So I thought, well, that's a bit of a challenge, that. So anyway, I started from then, and I saw it as a bit of a challenge, and I got 1 or 2 people together and decided to have a meeting on the wharf here. And I got 1 or 2 people together, as I say, who were interested in those days, and we started from there, really.
So that was about 1987, 88?
Well, I think it was earlier than that, actually. It's about 85 when I retired, because I'd managed to get early retirement from my teaching profession, and as I got early retirement, I came here and I thought, well, I'll have a nice relaxed time, but in fact it didn't turn out to be relaxing at all. In fact, I found I was very busy once I got here, altering the cottage and doing things, and also thinking about this canal. It bugged me. I thought, well, that canal's going to be a good route. So Ike Argent said it would only take 4.5 hours to get to the middle of Birmingham. I thought, well, 6 miles, 7 furlongs long, that's not going to be a difficult canal to restore.
And that's how it all began.
That's how it began.
So before long, I've got a document here setting up, firstly, the Friends of a Trust, and then it became a registered charity. And a company was formed, a company limited by guarantee and not having a share capital. Here's the original drawn up by Shakespeare's the solicitors in Birmingham. And here are the Articles of Association in particular, signed by you,
Yes.
in company with Brian Kingshott and Nick Graysbrook.
Yes.
Brian became the secretary with you and Nick Graysbrook the treasurer. So the three of you set up the company without capital, which of course is a very brave thing to do. Of course it doesn't mean it means you don't have any fund. Unlike the old commercial companies with a share capital, they had some money to spend. So here we are with a company that doesn't have capital, and yet you wanted to restore the canals just like you've just described. How did you get Brian and Nick involved with you?
Well, Nick and Brian were friends of mine. We'd been boating with them, and of course I'd been with IWA many years. And as I'd been boating with them, I asked them to come and join me at this point. And of course Nick was very happy to come along. Nick Graysbrook was a very able fellow, and I saw him as being a very good, useful treasurer, which he became. And Brian Kingshott, I thought, was a man of experience and ability, and he can certainly become a chairman. So I then set about making money, and I bought a whole lot of batteries. I used to buy £1,000 worth of batteries at a time, keep them in the garage here, and every time I sold a battery I made about £30 profit. And that money accumulated and went in to the initial start-up for the trust. I never wanted the money anyway. I'd got enough money for retirement. I got enough to live on. So all I wanted to do was to make money for the trust. And I started in those early days making money in any way I could. Doreen was very busy with me. She had what we call the ability to make cakes.
Sure has.
And we sold cakes and buns and things, and we made a lot of money that way.
But at that same time, here's a document from June 1988. It's got your name on it. You passed it to me, and I keep everything, don't I? The Birmingham Northern Relief Road, Featherstone to Coleshill and connecting roads. And this set out what has become the M6 toll motorway. But at that time, the BNRR was a bit of a threat. Why was it a threat, Eric?
Well, because if that was built, which it was going to be built, unfortunately it would have cut off our access to Birmingham, and it would have jeopardised the whole canal system. So we had to do something fairly quickly. And the idea was then mooted. I got Dennis Cooper involved, and he came along and said, well, he said, we've got to do something. And having got a chap by the name of Nick Graysbrook and Jim Saunders. Jim Saunders walked the whole length of the canal with me, and he saw that as being the first major problem where we'd have to spend money on reopening the canal. That was the first point at which he said we were spending a lot of money. The rest of it, he said, would be easy to restore, and it would not cost a great deal of money.
Wasn't Jim Saunders from Atkins, the consultants in South Wales at that time?
Indeed,
That's right, I remember that name now. Now, curiously, the plans in here show the proposed motorway crossing both the Hatherton Canals, we now call it, and the Lichfield Canals, we call it. Is it true that the government did not recognise those canals and made no provision for them at all in building the motorway?
Well, that's quite right. They completely ignored our wishes, and we took them on. We actually took them on, and Brian Kingshott was very able, and he was one of the people that was a driving force in those days with me. And we took the government on, and we took the road lobby on, and we won the case. And in fact, we had mentioned in the House of Commons about it, and in fact it was eventually they backed down. Yeah, we finished up getting access with the aqueduct over the BNRR, Northern Relief Road, and we also got the passage over under the A38. That was all agreed.
Again, it's just so interesting that you were setting about doing all this without capital, without much funding. And here is the original cash book from Nick Graysbrook, the treasurer at that time. And it started in 1989, 1990, 91. All the transactions in those 3 years fitted on just 2 pages of a cash book. There was so little of it. How daring it was to push that project forward.
Well, I wasn't interested in the amount of money that we needed at that stage. I knew we had to get some money, but I was doing my best to raise money here, and I wasn't aware of the fact that it would cost us so much money at the end of the day. And I still feel very guilty, because having started this project, there are now so many people involved in it, and so many people have spending their life occupation towards it, but I feel very guilty because I started without my pushing it in the first place. I think people wouldn't have got so involved.
So it was necessary to bring it to the public attention in a much more meaningful way. And you were lucky by having support from Duncan Moore. He was a local student at the time, and he drew up this document, Restoring the Northern Link, Lichfield and Hatherton Canal Restoration Trust, with very detailed plans and explanations. And indeed, it went forward to a printed publication a couple of years later, which went for sale. Now, that, of course, enabled people to pick up the document, they paid for it, and come to realise what it is you're trying to do. And that was 1990, 92, that period there. Hit the clock on a little bit further to 1993. Here's another very, very telling document, drawn up by John Horton, who'd become the engineer for the Lichfield and Hatherton Canals Trust at that time. This is 1993. As you see, it's a copious document. The Lichfield Canal, a report considering the costs, benefits and possible timescale of the restoration, including potential sources of funding. That's a complete package drawn up by one man, John Horton, and it's extremely detailed, and all the figure work is there and the plans, and he indicates that your project then could have been completed for £8 million. Only £8 million.
Well, that was a small amount, I thought, at that stage, a large amount then, but of course nowadays it seems a small amount. But John Horton was very helpful to me, and I'm very lucky because I had so much help and advice going along.
John Horton's document here, very thorough, as you expect of John, and suggests a number of sources of income. There are 8 schemes that he identifies on here: employment schemes, government schemes, land authorities, local authorities, European Regional Development Fund, we did get some of that in the end, private sector funding, commercial sponsorship, British Waterways, goes on, and voluntary labour, of course. Now, voluntary labour is a major, major aspect, and the whole of the canal, in my time since 1996, has been driven forward to such a great extent by voluntary labour. How important was that in the first stage?
So we had to make our first movements as early as we possibly could. The unfortunate thing was I got no help from the local people. I mean, the Canal Cruising Club at Lichfield were antagonistic towards it in the first place, and my name, as far as they were concerned, was Mud, not Wood, and people used to come along here from the Lichfield Cruising Club, and they completely ignored me sitting here. And but now, of course, it's all changed. They're very friendly, and the situation changed completely. But we had a lot of opposition. I mean, the chairman of the council in Lichfield District Council in those days had already bought a patch of land, which he got for £1, I understand, and he infilled it with toxic waste. Now, I was quite adamant that should not have been done, but I went to Lichfield District Council, gave a presentation to the District Council at that stage, and he walked out of the meeting because he said he was personally involved, and he walked out of the meeting. But quite frankly, I was disgusted with the way Lichfield would not help us in the first instance.
So John Horton, having devised this wonderful document, felt he had to actually do something about it so the public can see. And here we have some pictures from 1994-95, when the Trust had sufficient money by loan and by gifts to engage Midland earth movers to excavate what we now call Darnford Moors, the section of the canal leading up to Darnford Lane, bypassing the derelict Lock 29, because that couldn't be rebuilt, and the canal needs to pass under Darnford Lane at a lower level. And here's the work that started in 1995, this set here, and that led on a little bit later to building a lift bridge on that section as well. Now, that is so many years ago, and it is still like that now.
Yes.
What's gone wrong?
Well, nothing gone wrong. It's just that we're focused in other areas. It's necessary to move. You have to do what you have money for and what you're able to do at the particular time. You can't restore a canal piecemeal. You've got to do it little bits here and there, and that comes when you have certain advantages that come towards you. You have to take advantage of those gifts that come along, and we had a lot of people helping us and a lot of people coming, volunteers to come, including, I might say, Duke of Edinburgh's ward people.
And still is to this day, and we're very pleased to have so many of them. The numbers are growing as every week goes by. Thanks very much indeed. And of course this week we've all stood in silence to acknowledge the passing of the Duke. There's some other pictures here, also in Darnford Lane, Darnford section, the construction of the lift bridge. And since Lock 29 couldn't be reused, there's some wonderful stones have been taken off the top of it, and here they are being loaded onto John Horton's company lorry, of course, with our good friend Mike Brown with the company crane, lifting up these blocks, which are about 2 or 3 tons each. Where are they going, you might ask? Well, they were taken round to Tamworth Road and used in constructing the demolished top of Lock 25.
That's right.
So there you are, active pictures, and these were down in 1996. And some more there. The Darnford Brook that passes underneath the canal went through a culvert there which had collapsed years ago and had to be reconstructed. Well, a second one, in fact, there's a cast iron culvert there which had been silted up over the years and had to be removed, and you'll see in the pictures here replaced with a concrete structure which was put in place by Water Recovery Group, one of their early visits, one of many over the years, to help us with that particular project. So now the public were able to see things happening.
Absolutely.
And that made a big difference. From Darnford, attention moved, and again John Horton shifted the emphasis over to Fossway Lane. Why Fossway Lane, you may say? Well, that's where Lock 18, out of the 30 locks, top to bottom, the 30 locks in the fall of the land of about 240 feet from Brown Hills down to the Coventry Canal. And Lock 18 is about halfway right, close to Fossway Lane. And that happened to be on an area of land which the District Council had acquired after its closure, and were able to license the trust to carry out restoration work right there. So therefore it was very appealing to John Horton as the engineer to tackle this lock, which had been infilled, turfed over, you couldn't tell it was there. And bit by bit, again, the Water Recovery Group came to help us, and that's the time when I came to the trust as well, and took part in that work myself, to excavate Lock 18 and restore it. It was mostly intact. Some of the brickwork had eroded over the years and gradually got put together again, bit by bit. Here we have the original brass plaque for the reopening of the Lock 18, exactly on the 200th, the Canal Company's 200th anniversary, 11th of May 1997.
Yes.
And there you are with the local council or leader of the council, and Lichfield Conduit Lands Trust, who had made a grant payment towards that work. So again, the public were able to see work taking place.
Yes, that was the first time really that the Lichfield District Council had done given us anything of real value, and it was the first time that it really assisted us quite considerably in the restoration scheme. But it's taken a long time to get them to come round to thinking of that. Because thinking back originally, they objected to the canal going through right in the very beginning. I mean, when the canal was first built, Lichfield District Council, one of the people that objected to the council having the canal, they objected to the canal going through Lichfield because they said it was smelly and dirty, and they didn't want a dirty, smelly canal going through Lichfield in those days.
How things change, and over the years people come to realise that the canals are a national treasure. They don't particularly want to pay for them, but everybody says nationally and internationally they are a major British treasure. And here indeed is a picture taken on the very day, on the 11th of May 1997, with yourself and Councillor Bob White and Tony Brooks celebrating the reopening of Lock 18. What a wonderful moment that was.
It was indeed.
In 1996, something else we did in the Trust was to form a marketing group to try to raise some monies and actually promote the canal system for restoration. And I well recall a meeting with Eric and other directors at the time, and he said, well, what you need is some sort of t-shirts and videos and goods that people can buy. And sure enough, here is the original prototype t-shirt. It doesn't have the trust on it, because I guessed what we were going to do, Lichfield and Hatherton Canals restoration. But this is the original from 1996, well worn as you can see. And we also made good friends with Lawrence Hogg, the late Lawrence Hogg, who was a video producer. And he and I managed to put together this first video volume of the Lichfield and Hatherton Canals restoration. Part number 6 in his Birmingham Canal Navigations series. And I remember meeting Lawrence, and said, what you need is a video. I said, well, yeah, thank you. Well, can you make it? Yes, it'll cost you a lot. But with a bit of debating, we ended up, he would do it free, provided I provided all the pictures and the necessary narrative. And I ended up narrating the tape myself, because he asked me so to do. And that went for sale. He went on, of course, to introduce us to Chris Coburn, who's patron of our trust, and he and Lawrence together created this cut to Carnarvon, the voyage we did to Carnarvon to promote the canal offshore, would you believe, and raised a lot of money. It took months to do it. And that in turn led us to know David Suchet, the renowned actor, who's become our vice president. And here is narrating another volume for Lawrence Hogg, The Missing Links. It's the same subject, but put together in a different way. So we made very good friends with some very influential people who are acting for us right across the nation and indeed on the global stage.
Chris Coburn was a boating friend of ours, and I boated with Chris a long time, and he offered to do this trip across the channel, and eventually it led to raising a lot more money for the trust. And what's more than that, it gave us a wonderful focus for working, and gave us a great deal more publicity. The idea of the IWA starting at Lichfield was so that there would always be a source of funding for the Lichfield and Hatherton Canal Restoration Trust. I thought if I started the IWA at Lichfield, it would always be there as in the background to give them some money. Philip Sharp was so helpful. He was so knowledgeable, and he's so meticulous with what he does. He was very helpful. If you do a piece of work, he will dot the I's and cross the T's. He makes sure that everything's absolutely perfect. He's been a wonderful help for me getting the trust together, and also with Lichfield IWA.
And we could sit here all afternoon, Eric, but on this occasion I'm going to have to leave the early years to that point, because other people are going to pick up with other stories. Only to say that you must be seriously disappointed the governments have changed their minds about putting the canal tunnel through the old M6, which, as we said earlier on, is perhaps putting that into the dark shadows. However, through all these early years, you've told us of your personal experience, your determination from an impossible situation in the 1980s.
Everybody is inspired by somebody, and I was inspired in the first instance by Roger Lee Davis and Harry Arnold meeting me on a very old boat at Senston. They talked about the canals, and they had an old boat there which was called the Kangaroo, and we were working on the Kangaroo, and over the years I've restored many mileposts with the Trent and Mersey Canal. I even bought the mileposts here and painted them on the wharf here so that they could be ready for them. So I've done a lot of restoration work with Trent and Mersey Canal Society before I came to think about the Lichfield Canal. So it was that background that spurred me on to come along here, and certainly it was the driving force of people like Harry Arnold, who at that stage was very interested in restoring the Montgomery. That's all he could think about, the Montgomery Canal. But of course that's history now, and so is this one. We're going on very well. I'm delighted with the way things are going at the moment, and very soon we shall see it open.
Yes, indeed, let's hope so. Indeed, Eric, thank you for giving us your time today to explain the difficulties in the early years, and undaunted, you pressed on, and more people joined in to exercise as volunteers or fundraisers to engage contractors to do certain work. We managed to get substantial grants. We've turned over about £4.5 million in cash through those years, because I took over the treasurership from Nick Graysbrook back in 1999, and I watch every penny that goes through assiduously, much to the disgust of some people. I won't let them spend it. But thank you for your determination in bringing us through those early years. We all know what has happened since then because so many people are involved with it, and others will take up the story from here. Eric, thank you very much indeed for having us in your household.
Well, it's now going to be a canal open for everybody. We've got a lot of international friends in New Zealand and America. They love to come over here, and people from abroad will love to come and spend money on this Lichfield Canal. It will be a vital link to the northeast corner of Birmingham canal network when it's open, and I look forward to going along the canal myself, and hopefully we'll get it open before I disappear.
Eric, thank you so much indeed.